Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Faster Way podcast. I am thrilled to be here today with Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. I hope I said that right, Dr. Lauren. That was a mouthful, but I am really excited to have you on for a podcast conversation because as we were discussing in the pre-interview chat, there is quite a bit of confusion online related to women's fitness, women's fat loss, women's nutrition. And we're going to really take a deep dive on a few particular topics. But before we do so, share with our listeners when and why did you enter the fitness industry or even the wellness space?
I am a former fitness professional. I had a personal training business in New York City, and I was interested in the science because I was trying to get the best results for myself and my clients at the time. And I decided that I wanted to do some of this research myself. So I went back to school. I have a master's in exercise science. I have a PhD in integrative physiology. And my research focuses on strength training and women and hormones and a lot of the things that the people are talking a lot about right now on the internet.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I love it. So you were actually born in New York City. You were born in Manhattan, which I was as well. What year were you born in Manhattan, Lauren?
I was born in 1988.
Oh my god. Okay, so we are basically the same age. I was born in 1987. We, like, probably passed each other in the hospital practically. I lived on Long Island for 8 years, and then we moved to Pennsylvania, but I still do have family in New York. And now you're actually in Toronto, correct? What brought you to Toronto?
Yeah, so I left New York to move to Tampa because I lived there for a couple of years when I was doing my master's. And then I did my PhD at a Canadian university and then met and married a Canadian. So I
Aw,
stayed.
I love that. And you are, like, committed to that cold weather, huh?
No, I don't like it. I complain every year.
Well, I say winter is a choice. So now you just got to let your partner know that. And if anyone's good at convincing, it seems like you are based on your social media content. So maybe someday you'll join me back in Florida. I actually live in the summer year round because I also have a house in Costa Rica. So right now it's actually summer in Costa Rica and I spend as much time there as I can. And then when it's summer in Florida, I flip flop. So okay, so let's dive in. We're just going to go there. We're not even going to warm it up. We're just going to jump to a controversial broadcast, a post, a podcast that was recently published regarding how women should never train fasted if they are in perimenopause or menopause. Okay, so Lee Bergen and I spoke about this if you're listening and you caught last week's Coach Confessional. We spoke about it just a little bit, how there's all this kind of like black and white rules coming out right now. But one of the rules, and I've had thousands of clients send me this reel or podcast and say, oh my God, what do you think? What do you think? It says I shouldn't train fasted. Amanda, I've been training fasted since I started Faster Way. I've lost 35 pounds. I feel amazing. Da, 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 da. Do I need to stop? So, Dr. Lauren, can you just shed some light on this? Why was this published? Because there's got to be some science that's supporting the concept that women in perimenopause and menopause shouldn't train fasted. So you are the expert. I want to hear your opinion. Let's go ahead and dive in.
There's sort of a kernel of truth to some of this, but it's really not evidence-based when we look at the human subject data. So when we start the scientific process, we often will start in an animal model and we can study kind of a simple model in rodents. And then based on what we find there, we might move on to a human trial, maybe a short-term trial, and then we would look at the long-term trial. So if we're looking for something like muscle growth, we would say, hey, what's going on if this mouse is running on a wheel? And what's going on if we feed them this or we don't feed them that? And then we move on to the human trials. And often the animal model doesn't apply to the human model because humans are a more complex dynamic system. But it's important to acknowledge that all of this research is important, right? So when we look at fasting, there is a paper on mice where the female mice who were fasting had a disrupted release of estrogen and progesterone. So this is an interesting hypothesis generating finding. Maybe it would play out the same way in women, but there's no data in human women that would suggest that's the case. So some of the claims that I hear about fasting relate to the increase in cortisol. And it's true that when you wake up first thing in the morning, your cortisol levels are higher. That's normal. That's how cortisol works. It's higher in the morning and it's lower in the evening, and it kind of fluctuates throughout the day. It's also true that prolonged fasting increases cortisol. And it's true that exercise increases cortisol. So there's this narrative taken from all these things that are true, and then somehow that's flipped into saying this is bad, you're going to lose muscle, you're going to gain body fat. That part is not true. So cortisol is really effectively regulated in healthy people, and you don't need to worry about bringing your levels back down by eating, or it's not necessary. It's self-regulating unless you have a health condition. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, the fact that we are taking evidence from mice and from mouse studies and relating it to extraordinarily complex human beings and specifically females. I didn't realize that's where some of these commentaries were coming from, was from rodent studies. So that should give all of us pause. If a particular expert on the internet is saying, well, the biggest mistake that women in perimenopause are making is training fasted, but then when you actually look into the evidence and you see that it was based on a rodent study, that should give us pause. And it's funny because last week I posted and I said, y'all, let's stop telling women that they can't train fasted. Let's look at this in context. Fasted training isn't the problem. The problem is stress, it's garbage recovery, it's many other factors. And I had someone say, well, you're not a medical doctor, and I think a medical doctor knows more than you do and has all this evidence. And I said, that's great. And I've worked with over 500,000 clients and have clinical trials. So I don't know what you want me to say. I'm like, so the fact that it was, wow, rodent studies is interesting. So let's just dive into cortisol a little bit more. There's so much confusion when it comes to cortisol. Cortisol is bad. Cortisol is bad. No, you need cortisol to survive. Okay. Cortisol should be high in the morning. That's natural. We want it to be high in the morning. I want to be jumping out of bed, popping up when I'm in Costa Rica. It's 4:45 a.m. It's 5 a.m. I'm popping out of bed. I'm going out there. I'm watching the sunrise. My cortisol is high. Personally, I'm going to train fasted in the morning. And guess what? There's going to be another little increase in cortisol. Is that bad? No. Is that normal? Yes. The issue is right now there is so much confusion related to just this concept of cortisol, and you've seen it's like the cortisol cocktails, and it's the just so many things regarding cortisol. So can you shed a little bit of light on that? It's, of course, we do have more cortisol receptors in our midsection, blah, 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 blah. But like, what are the dangers of high cortisol, when, how, and why, versus like, what are we actually looking to happen throughout the day?
I think what's happened is that people are taking an unhealthy cortisol elevation and taking those symptoms and kind of applying them to normal cortisol fluctuations. So, chronically elevated cortisol is a problem. It's associated with an underlying health condition. If you have something like a pancreatic tumor, if you have an eating disorder, there are certain health conditions that a symptom of which is chronically elevated cortisol. And it's true that in those people, sometimes they experience a body fat redistribution or body fat gain. So when I say there's kind of a kernel of truth, but then it's being misapplied, that's happening again here, because that doesn't mean that that increase in cortisol during your fasted workout is making you fatter. Because you, as a healthy person, have normal cortisol fluctuations, and the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenals, they all work together to raise cortisol as needed and then bring those levels back down as needed. So we don't need to manually intervene and fix anything. It's all good. The fluctuations are normal.
Yeah. Now, if you are stressed all the time and you are not becoming stress effective and there's quite a few circumstances in your life that are causing chronically elevated levels of cortisol, it is going to be negative long term. Okay, it is absolutely going to be detrimental long term. But I think what is frustrating to me is the fact that I'll have certain clients come in and say, well, I heard on Instagram that I shouldn't train fasted because it increases my cortisol. And I'm like, okay, that's actually not a negative thing. It's a natural, normal thing. And I don't want you to vilify this whole concept of what your body is doing and meant to do. So, yeah, I'm glad that you said also, like, there is a kernel of truth in everything, but we just have to navigate through it. And this is what we're trying to do in this conversation is navigate through it. So let's just like kind of research aside, and it was a rodent study and blah, blah, blah. Like, what is your personal strategy? Do you train fasted in the morning? Do you personally feel better training in the afternoon after breaking your fast? Like, just share with me as a fitness professional your personal strategy.
If I'm training in the morning, I always train fasted. I'm not a big breakfast person anyway, but I also never like training full. Um, and I know plenty of people who are concerned about this message that's out there. They send me the same messages because they say, I feel sick if I eat before I work out, or I have GI issues if I eat before I work out. So if I'm going to train in the morning, then I prefer to be fasted. But there are some days where I exercise in the afternoon and then I will have eaten. I think for some people, they might find they perform better if they've had some meals before they exercise. It kind of depends on what you're doing, what kind of exercise you're doing. But ultimately, I think personal preference is really key here because when we look at long-term data, um, people who train fed and fasted are gaining muscle, they're losing body fat. Uh, there isn't really anything to say, there's something magical about fasting, but it's definitely a tool and it's a totally appropriate tool to use if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. You and I shared the exact same strategy. We're both from Manhattan. You lived in Tampa. My goodness, we are like sisters. So 3 times a week when I'm in Florida, I train fasted. The other days, I just, because of my schedule, I train in the afternoon. I usually break my fast around 11 or noon at the office. And then when I get home, I test a workout, I do a workout, and it just happens to be that I've already eaten. When I'm in Costa Rica, 9 times out of 10, I train fasted, but it's based on my schedule. It's based on convenience. It's based on how I'm feeling. There is an art to listening to your body. It's not just a science, it's also an art. And there's certain times where, for example, yesterday I was just kind of feeling a little bit tired. We had a busy weekend. It was Easter weekend. I got 5 kids. I'm toting everybody around to get. And I just was like, I'm not feeling good to do a very heavy lift. So I did, a different workout and I picked up lighter weights. And, there's also, we're going to talk about it next, but some cycle syncing workout trends going around the internet as well that I want to hear your opinion on. Listening to your body is so key. And it sounds like you are aligned with me where it's like you do what works for your schedule on particular days. You're not overly worried about rules. You're not like, oh my gosh, I have to eat and break my fast before my workout, even if I don't feel good. I have the same experience where clients all the time are like, I would throw up if I tried to eat before I did a HIIT workout. I just don't want to. Maybe a heavy leg day, they're like, okay, I'm going to have like some carbs and protein, but I'm not going to worry about feeling full. It's just going to be like a little, satisfaction ahead of time. So definitely aligned there. You're very casual about it, but I just want to reiterate the fact that, guys, there is no research or evidence that supports the claim that women in perimenopause or menopause should never train fasted. Now, if you don't feel Great. Training fasted and you feel better. Eating something and then training, then do that. It's based on preference. It's not a scientific rule, okay? And would you just agree with what I just said, Dr. Lauren?
100%.
Okay,
I
cool.
think it's really dangerous that we're overcomplicating fitness for women and eating for women, because I think whenever we overcomplicate something, then we lose the sustainability factor, and then we end up just not developing good exercise and nutrition habits.
hmm
So
hmm
we need to keep it simple when it's appropriate to be kept simple.
Yeah. 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 And the claim that was made on, we're not going to say names, but on a particular podcast that went around recently, it was the biggest mistake women in perimenopause are making is training fasted. And I'm like, listen, there's a lot of mistakes that us women in perimenopause are making. I can't say training fasted is the biggest mistake. I'm like, we got a lot of mistakes. That's not the biggest one.
I
Oh,
also just really don't like the framing of that bit kind of fear-based messaging. Let me tell
yeah.
you everything you're doing wrong.
Mhm.
I know that sells, but
That's right. And I do wonder if part of it is just like, okay, we're going to get some clicks, we're going to get some more views, we're going to get some more engagement. I hate to think that that's the strategy, but it might be the strategy. And as a marketer, I don't do that, but I understand that might be the strategy.
it's
Okay.
hard to explain any other reason to do that.
Yeah, I know, I know. Okay, so let's talk about cycle syncing. And on my coach confessional last week, Lee and I discussed this just a little bit. So if you heard that, it might be redundant on this conversation, but there is a lot of popularity around kind of the cycle syncing workouts. But I want to hear about evidence because, admittedly, I don't know much about this. I haven't done a deep dive on this. What is the evidence to support cycle syncing workouts, and what is your personal opinion?
I've studied this extensively,
Great.
and the premise is that somehow your hormone profile is in one phase or another is going to be better or worse for either your performance or for the adaptations that you're going to get from exercise. So you'll see recommendations like for this week, you should lift weights. And then for this week, you should do yoga and gentle stretching. Um, and what I did in the lab is actually measure the muscle's response to exercise in women in the high estradiol phase, so that's the late follicular phase, compared to the mid luteal phase, that's the high progesterone peak. And so we're testing this, and again, this all actually comes from rodent models. The evidence that would show there's somehow something anabolic or good for muscle growth about estrogen that comes from a rodent model study. So when we actually measure how the muscle is responding, what happens in terms of protein synthesis, we take biopsies, we look at all the downstream effects. There are no differences between one phase or the other phase. You aren't quote unquote catabolic in one phase or the other. You can absolutely improve your performance, gain muscle, and lose fat. The most important thing is that you're consistent over time. And so a huge problem with some of these cycle syncing programs is that they keep changing what you're supposed to be doing. And if we know anything about just sound exercise programming and how to adapt over time, you need to do the thing consistently in order to improve at it.
Oh, okay. Literally, this is so trendy. I was almost hoping that you would be like, "Yeah, there's some evidence." Literally on my coach confessional last week, I was like pulling up what the internet says about this, and I'm like, "Lee, it's almost like you need to impact 2 solid weeks of your month based on this cycle sync." I'm like, for me, it's max 2 days. If I have crappy sleep 2 days before my period, if I just slept like garbage, then I'm not gonna lift as heavy because I just don't have the energy. And then maybe one day on my period, I'll kinda switch things up a little bit, but it's 2 days a month, not 2 weeks a month. And that's what I was saying with one of our trainers who's now 52, and she's like absolute goals, like just a specimen, most muscle of any 52-year-old you've ever seen, just awesome. And so you are saying kind of what my suspicion was, but Dr. Lauren, like, why is this so trendy? And it's just adding this layer of complication where it's like, not only do we have to worry about showing up for our workout, now we have to worry about switching up the workout based on the day on the cycle and the da 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 and then and it's just like, for me, if I wake up and I feel good, I'm gonna lift heavy no matter what. If I had a crappy night of sleep, yeah, then I'm gonna listen to my body. And like I said, it's an art, not a science sometimes when it comes to listening to your body and being a little bit more self-aware that way. But you're saying again, it was the rodent studies. Man, ugh. I literally was like, there might be some things we don't agree on, and that might be one of them. And no, you just came out and said it's actually not too much of a thing we need to be worried about.
It's
Okay.
really, really not. And the problem when we look at some of these, sure, if you have cramps or something during your period, right before your period, many people do, then great. As you said, listen to your body, switch up the intensity, skip the gym if you have to. It's one workout. That is very different. I think every program should have an element of that because what if we didn't sleep well? What if we're jet lagged? What if we're going through a really high stress time and we just need to skip the gym one day? That great, have that built into your program, the ability to do that. But there's nothing really different or special about how you should treat anything around your menstrual cycle.
Oh my gosh, we are gonna get some haters. We're gonna get some trolls on this post, and I love it. I love it. Okay. Um, maybe this is something that we're gonna disagree on a little bit. So in the faster way, we do 2 days a week of HIIT training. We try not to surpass 60 minutes a week, even 45 minutes a week of like really intense HIIT training because I want my clients to focus on building muscle. So we're always chasing muscle gains and we want to, burn the visceral fat. So we do 2 days of HIIT. And the recommendation is to follow that up with low intensity, steady state cardio. And I want everybody every day, no matter what, to be taking a walk, get that vitamin D, blah, 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 blah. We don't do a lot of long form cardio. So we're not necessarily training for a half marathon. We're not getting on a spin bike for hours at a time. We do a total body strength day, which is my favorite. It's shoulders, legs. We do an upper body day, which is biceps, triceps, back. We do a very heavy leg day. We're working legs quite a bit throughout the week, but the leg day is my favorite day of the week as well. I think I already said favorite once, but I'll say it again. That day, we also have a treat. And then, of course, we do the 2 active recovery workouts per week, the Pilates, the yoga, the bar. What is your opinion on HIIT training versus low intensity steady state cardio, which again, we kind of combine the two and say we're going to do HIIT and then immediately following that, we're going to do low intensity steady state. But what's your opinion on the value of both?
I think both are valuable. The major value of HIIT is the time efficiency. So
Yep.
you don't have to train as long to get the benefits. But uh, some people really hate interval training. And
That's true.
especially things that if it involves something like burpees or jumping up and down, a lot of older people really don't like that.
Mhm.
And so I think again, it should be based on goals and preferences. So if you are somebody who really loves to go for a run, then go for a run. If you don't, then you don't need to go for a run. And you probably shouldn't because if your running mechanics are not good, then you're more likely to get injured. I think physical activity is good and you should do whatever kind of cardio you will do consistently. So if that's HIIT, great. If that's hiking or walking or cycling, then that's great too. There are different benefits to each, but when we look at things like overall fat loss, you can lose fat doing the low intensity steady state stuff, moderate intensity steady state stuff, or the HIIT or sit type training.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other, or maybe one more big myth that you are consistently debunking in 2025? Like you're just, kind of like me, where I'm getting constant reels and messages about you should never train fasted if you're in perimenopause or menopause. Is there anything else that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just constantly having to talk about XYZ?
One is for peri and post menopause that you need to be doing very heavy loads, so sets of 5 or less. And when we look at heavy and moderate and lighter loads, we've done that study in every population at this point, men, women, young, and old. And you can gain muscle doing high reps, moderate reps, low reps, as long as it's challenging enough. So if I can lift 100 pounds 5 times, or I can lift 60 pounds 12 times, or I can lift 40 pounds 25 times, all of those will give me muscle growth. It just needs to be a challenging load for me. So we need to be getting kind of close-ish to failure if you're doing that lighter load training. But that is another really problematic message, because women who aren't used to strength training hear that and it sounds really intimidating. And we need to start with, proper form. And again, something that you can do consistently. And so if you like heavy training, then great, do it. But that's not the only way to gain muscle.
Interesting. I haven't really heard that too much online. So people are saying you need to do 5 sets, 5 reps. And that is the way for women in perimenopause and menopause to gain muscle versus doing like 3 sets, 8 to 10 reps, or 4 sets, 12 to 15 reps. That's so interesting. I hadn't heard that too much. In the faster way, we switch things up quite a bit. We're in a superset season right now where we're doing 2 moves back to back, typically in the 8 to 10 rep range to failure. Now in June for our advanced programming, because we have foundations, standard, and then advanced. For our advanced programming, we are going to do 5 by 5, but that's for our more so like athletes that are like really looking to change up body composition in the summer. And we're going to be doing a bit of a bell curve macro cycle as well. But yeah, I hadn't heard that too much. So that's good because it does support what we're doing, which is during different, seasons and challenges, we'll kind of switch up the programming, of course, focus on progressive overload. But that's interesting that you're hearing that as a myth. Any final piece of advice that you want to leave with my clients who have an average age of 43, but I'm got girls in their teens all the way up to I got, a client in her, 80s and tens of thousands of clients all over the world right now. Maybe like one final piece of advice that you have for my community.
Lifting weights is really important and so beneficial, and it's never too late to start. So start and do what you can when you can in whatever way works for you. And try not to be confused by all the noise on the internet that is fear-based and telling you that you can't do this or you must do this or how dare you do this. We there are a lot of ways to be physically active and healthy, and so we need to do what works for us in the long term. But definitely lift weights, super important. Muscle's good.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, totally agree. Dr. Lauren, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. Where can we find and follow you online?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Lauren CS1. And if you're actually wanting to read any of my research, then I'm also on ResearchGate. I have a website. You can go there.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. And I hope all of you listening have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to go lift heavy and follow that up with some protein. Bye, everyone.